Hello, everybody. Isle of Dogs, Wes Anderson's latest, is hitting theaters in limited release this weekend, so we thought it would be a good time to do a little indie roundup.
Yes.
Roth, you've seen some movies. We've both seen some movies, but some of the smaller films that we think deserve a little bit of attention.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's start with Isle of Dogs, which I have not yet had the chance to see, but you did.
I did. I saw it on Thursday night, opening night. It was a lot of fun. It's one. I was looking up. I haven't actually seen a whole bunch of Wes Anderson's movies for some reason on the big screen. I think this is only the fourth one that I've actually seen in theaters, and I think we're not. This is his ninth movie. I think you probably know by now whether or not you like his aesthetic. And Isle of Dogs is very much Wes Anderson's established aesthetic.
Perfectly symmetrical, man.
Very symmetrical, very quirky, kind of a very dark tinge to its sense of humor. This movie actually got a little darker than I had anticipated it getting in a few places. It's a little bit more adult than Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is the other stop motion film in Wes Anderson's catalog. But I like Wes Anderson. I think that he's gone a little too far in some of his movies into kind of his own circular vision of what he likes. This one was not so much that for me, and I think it's a really cute story. He cast the voices very well. Bryan Cranston and Bill Murray, Jeff Goldblum as dogs.
Sure.
And I liked it. I thought it was really cute. Had kind of an adult sense of humor to it, so I wouldn't bring a small child. It's not action packed. It's very wry, a bit slow. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun story. And again, if you like Wes Anderson, it's probably just about exactly what you would expect. That kind of quirky.
I have a question about it since I've seen the trailers. How much is it delving into, and do you think it will bring attention to Trash Island?
Trash Island in general. Well, Trash Island has been one of our great shames for quite some time.
Yes.
No, it's looking at the trailer, I think the trailer is a very basic picture, if that's what you've seen, of what this movie is. The trailer basically just establishes the premise, and I think there's a lot more to the movie than you've seen. But it's this idea of it's very kind of simple in its telling, but it's very complicated as far as the relationships go. And I think, there's a lot of deeper meanings that you can look into, but also Wes Anderson is very kind of, I call him a museum director. He makes the kind of movies that you almost feel like you're supposed to watch them like this,
I feel like I have to watch them in kind of imperfect symmetry.
Posture and symmetry. Yeah.
With two drinks on either side.
It is a beautiful film. I mean, again, the aesthetic that he brings to this, and I think it was a little more advanced than he got with Fantastic Mr. Fox, which itself I thought was very beautiful. This one is a little starker. Mm-hmm. It's not as lush and deep and rich as Fantastic Mr. Fox was, but that's its own kind of aesthetic choice. And I thought it was one of the best. I would definitely encourage you to go see it on a big screen because it's one of the best looking films that I've seen in a really long time. And I think he does some really cool things with the kind of tactile things you just saw with the fighting. There's a lot of things using cotton swabs, pieces of fabric. There's some animation that's employed. So as far as the actual visuals and stuff, I think it's brilliantly done. And story-wise and everything, I think it's very cute.
Yeah.
And quirky, like you would expect from Wes Anderson.
All right. Well, there's a small film called Flower. Now, this came out of Sundance and several of the other festivals. Director Max Winkler. This has gotten pretty mixed reviews so far. But right here, well, she's gone now. That's the reason you're going to see this movie. This performance from this lead actress is something I think people should pay attention to, and I think you should pay attention to her career. Zoe Deutsch, I believe is how you pronounce her name. Mm-hmm. And it is it's an interesting film in that I can understand a negative reaction to it. It's got a very mixed tone. It's a very dark comedy. It's dealing with some incredibly sensitive material. I think the perception could be somewhat indelicately, and that perhaps it doesn't always coalesce in the way that you would want. But I do think that it tells the story of adolescence in a way that is raw, and that people often back away from. And films that deal with adolescence in a way that feels more real, in a sense, often stir up controversy because you don't want to think about teenagers that like they really are.
There's some ugly sharp corners to adolescence that movies kind of tend to kind of gloss over.
Yeah, we want a lot of times we want the pretty picture of it, right? But it's not always that. Some people, there are teenagers that have had a really rough experiences and they don't necessarily know how to feel it. The other energy that she has, that the movie 13 had and kids had it as well, it's not like those films necessarily, but in the sense that she feels out of control. She feels completely out of control and like she's just making terrible decisions with no thought for the future, like a teenager. So there was a lot about it that I actually really liked and connected with, in terms of the story and the telling of this character. However, definitely adult. Definitely a very adult movie. And even for an adult, I think it could be read as insensitive and offensive to some. But I think in total, it's worth looking at it, especially for her.
Yeah. Oh, strong lead performance. Speaking of lead performances,
Here's
let's talk
one
about another one that we both really like. This is one of my favorite movies so far this year.
Me too.
In limited release, it's kind of rolling out a little bit wider as the weeks go on, called Thoroughbreds, starring Anya Taylor-Joy and Olivia Cooke, who you can see in Ready Player One, opening next weekend. I like this movie.
I love this movie.
I particularly on the strength of the two performances. You kind of, as the movie starts, you kind of think that this movie is going to belong to Olivia Cooke, but as it progresses, the focus kind of shifts, and I think that they both really do some interesting, kind of subversive work in a way of just like, Olivia Cooke plays a character who is exactly as she presents herself.
Yes.
Like it's just, this is who I am. I'm not going to apologize for it. Anya Taylor-Joy gets to kind of peel the layers back on her character as the movie goes along. So I think she's just as good, but in a much different way. They're two girls that are, were childhood friends, are now kind of separated by class, separated by circumstance, but sort of rediscover each other, and they have an influence on each other that ultimately pays off. I think it's in really surprising ways. I like this film. Dark, like Flower, like you said about Flower, very dark. This is not a happy, cheery film. This is a pitch black comedy, if you want to call it a comedy. I guess you probably could, but it is a dark, dark movie, but one that I really liked.
I loved this movie, and Cory Finley, who's the director, first-time director, he's also a playwright, and I think if you compare the work of these two young directors, or newish directors, he is someone that I think we're going to be seeing a lot from. This is so adeptly directed because it's a movie that is about female friendships, which, by the way, that's not an easy thing to capture. And again, it has a lot more, like you said earlier, sharp edges than people necessarily portray on screen. Now, this is very heightened. This is theatrical in the sense of the circumstances are very, very heightened. It's beautifully shot.
It's gorgeously shot.
The way, and this is something he actually came in and we spoke with him, that we talked about. His use of negative space, I think, is brilliant in this film. And I know that sounds very hoity-toity, but it is, because it's what you're looking at. You're waiting for it to be filled, and it creates this incredible sense of tension. It also asks questions about what it is to feel things and connect with people. Who is a sociopath? Who isn't? Desperate times bring these two together. And it's kind of even like got a larger metaphor about society, capitalism, class, what we value. This is a really deep movie, and it's also really entertaining.
And I love that it plays with the sympathies of the audience, where you're kind of presented characters in such a way that you feel sympathetic or unsympathetic towards them. And as the movie goes on, you learn more about them that kind of make you question your own judgments. Like, should I be sympathizing with this character, or should I hate this character? Or is this character doing things, with the information that I now know, things that I thought were terrible before, that now I'm like, maybe there's a kernel of things here that I didn't realize. And again, like I said, you learn, it's not just here are the characters and here's the story. You learn so much more. They kind of weave in and out, and there are bad people that do bad things, and there are good people that you think are good. Are they doing good things? Are they doing bad things for good reasons or good things for bad reasons? Should be noted, one of Anton Yelchin's final performances.
It's his final.
This is his last performance.
Yeah.
I liked him in this movie. He just kind of plays. I love self-delusional characters, and he is a very self-deluded person. And it's very much a supporting role, but he kind of has his own journey that he takes in this movie, and it just kind of is sad to think about. The roles unplayed from him, because he really, I think, was a very good dramatic actor, as well as the franchise stuff, Star Trek and everything else that he was getting into. And it is sad. I think he's very good in this movie, and it's sad to think about the work that we're not going to get to see from him.
It's a big loss. I mean, it's a weird film in the sense that these two young women are coming up in their careers, and we lost him, and they seem to have sort of similar trajectories in the sense of they're doing really interesting smaller films, and then they're doing bigger films as well. I will say that this is a movie that I think Anton Yelchin character does play a pivotal role, because it's a movie that's saying, what are you willing to sacrifice for what you desire materially?
Yeah.
And what are you willing to sacrifice for what's actually ultimately the right thing to do for another being? And it's not always clear who's ethically sound. And if the things that we value, like emotion, we think emotion means that if you are a feeling person, you are a good person. This movie says not necessarily so.
Yeah. Maybe stay detached.
Maybe stay detached. It's a really interesting film. I 1000% without reservations recommend this movie. Go see it in the theater if you can. It's also beautiful.
I agree. Seek it out if you can find it. If not, it'll probably be available somewhat soon on demand or Blu-ray or iTunes or wherever you find your home viewing options. The last movie, Roth, we want to talk about is one that I've talked about on Charting for the last couple of weeks, because it has been the 2-time per screen champion the last 2 weeks. It is also expanding. It is The Death of Stalin by Armando Iannucci, who you might know as the creator of Veep. He also did The Thick of It, which is a great political comedy from a few years ago. So many, a huge list of British television credits, and Alan Partridge and comedy and everything else. Again, this is a theme that I don't think we necessarily meant. Another very dark comedy in the sense that it's in a way it's the most traditional comedy of the ones that we've talked about today, but in other ways I think also the darkest in different ways. And it's those two things that while I enjoyed the film, that's kind of making me struggle the most with this movie is the balance between those two. Do those two kind of approaches fit together? In some places I think they do in a very darkly humorous way, and in some places I think they did in a tragic way, and in some places I really weren't sure if they did at all. I'm curious what you thought.
So I saw this movie, oddly enough, on the plane because it was out already in the UK, and I was on British Airways, so that was convenient.
Yeah.
But I really loved it. I think that where maybe I get tripped up a little bit is that this is a political satire that is looking at Stalin, who's a terrible dictator, but not so much Stalin because it's about the death of Stalin.
Right.
So it's the people who surround him who are equally corrupt, vicious, talk about sociopathic.
Yeah.
And a culture and a system which is corrupt and vicious and broken. And how easy it is for that to happen, and for how, if there's a power void, the struggles that will come up to fill it. I think where it's tricky is that Stalin was a real person.
Right.
20 million people did die. And so when it feels like you're laughing at that, that's where you have an internal struggle. If it was a fake made up character, less so.
Right.
But I heard an interview with him and he was saying, Charlie Chaplin did The Great Dictator while the war was still happening.
True. But he wasn't playing Hitler. I mean, he was, but he wasn't. Again, that was and I think that was the struggle that I felt watching the movie, was this idea of it's not a Stalin-esque character.
Yeah.
This is Stalin. So while there is plenty of room for it, not just comedy, but the movie starts off farcical, which I love farce. I think it's hilarious, and I laughed a lot at this movie. This is a very, very funny movie. I think going into it, the last third or so is where I started to feel the struggle on Iannucci's part and the team behind the movie, where they're saying, okay, we've had a lot of laughs, but we do need to kind of pay service to the fact that this is also a very dark, very oppressive regime, and we don't want it to appear as if we are making
light
fun of it
that,
or light of it, even though we are, making fun of the ridiculousness of these characters. This is a weird analogy, but it's not like Team America, where you had a sitting North Korean dictator who they went very broad with, but so broad that
Or the interview.
Or the interview again,
Yeah.
so broad that they turn them literally into a puppet.
Yeah.
But they're cartoon characters,
Yeah.
and I feel like this they couldn't go quite that broad. So I would recommend the movie. I think it was really funny. It's not a four-corner tentpole comedy. It is definitely a political comedy,
Yeah.
a farce. So I think you kind of would want to be engaged in things like that if you like that genre. But it held me back a little bit because I did kind of feel the conflict there, and it showed for me a little bit in the actual movie itself.
I think that it's asking questions too, and it's asking you to think about things that are uncomfortable to think about. And I gotta say, I think it's important to do that. We talked about this too on Charting, I think, where he chose to have everyone speak in their actual accent. So if you're Steve Buscemi, you speak with an American accent. If you're British, you have a British accent, Cockney and so forth, Scottish. And the reason is because there's so many different accents in Russia, plus often we don't do the Russian accent well.
Yeah.
But the other point he was trying to make is like, this isn't isolated to one point in history. This could happen. If he's in the UK, here, you need to think about this, and you need to think about how these people come into power, and what that could mean. I think that's an important thing inside of a farce that is really funny in moments and very uncomfortable in others. So I would say caveat to this one as well, like, you're not going to feel super comfortable and good after you come out of this movie. You might need a little chaser,
just a little bit.
And,
it does drive home, this may be played for laughs, and that politics can sometimes be farcical, but they are serious business.
Yes. Unlike Veep, which is 100% a comedy.
Very much a comedy. Like, this is kind of, in a way, spending the message just like, you may laugh, but there's real consequences to this.
Because the stakes here and for them were mass murder.
Yeah, mass murder and things that have echoed through generations and decades, and so not quite as lightweight, I think, as maybe some people might expect going into it. Not necessarily a bad thing, but something I think people should know going in.
But these are some of the smaller films that are out that you should think about seeing for a variety of reasons. I think unequivocally the one that we would say you got to see this movie is Thoroughbreds.
Thoroughbreds, of all of these, is the one that I would give the highest marks. So just like go out right now and see it. Isle of Dogs, I think, if you like Wes Anderson, if you like the kind of quirky comedy, seek it out. Death of Stalin, same thing. If you like that kind of movie, seek it out. And I'm looking forward to seeing Flower.
Yeah, and I think Flower is one that you can probably see at home comfortably. And look out for that performance, because I really think she is something special.
Someone to watch.
Yeah.
All right, Roth, that's it. That's our Indie Roundup.
Indie Roundup done. We'll be back with more indies to talk about.
And huge movies.
Some
big ones coming out. Something about a team of Avengers and something.
There's some kind of war.
Some kind of war going on.
Some kind of
forever.
Thanos. I think there's
Infinity.
a glove.
I don't know. We're just getting ready for that.
Smell the glove, Captain America.
Spinal Tap. I like it. All right. Thanks for watching. See you next time.